From 1969 to 1972, Apollo missions 12 through 16 placed seismometers on the moon to measure moonquakes, which are similar to earthquakes on Earth. These instruments were intended to gain knowledge of the moon composition by measuring ground noises and shaking. What first shocked scientists was the fact that moonquakes could last almost an hour. What confused them even more was what happened after Apollo 12 deliberately crashed its lunar module onto the moon's surface. Instead of a short blip on their sensors, what they found was, for almost an hour, the moon rang like a bell. Hello and welcome to Wicked Encounters. I'm your host, Allie, and today we're going to explore the hollow moon theory. Now, before I get ahead of myself, what exactly is a moonquake? Well, like I said previously, they are similar to earthquakes on Earth, but on the moon. According to NASA, there are at least 4 different kinds of moonquakes. The first are deep moonquakes, which are roughly 700 kilometers below the surface and are potentially caused by tides. Then, there are vibrations caused by meteorites striking the moon. Thermal quakes are caused by the expansion of the moon's crust when the sun hits it after a lunar night, which lasts 2 weeks. And finally, there are shallow moonquakes, which are those that happen 20 to 30 miles below the surface. Now, the first 3 types of moonquakes are mild, but shallow moonquakes can be quite the experience. These shallow moonquakes, of which 28 were recorded between 1972 and 1977, every one of them lasted at least longer than 10 minutes. Some even lasted for almost an hour, and a few registered up to a 5.5 on the Richter scale. For comparison, earthquakes typically last only half a minute, and a magnitude 5 quake can cause damages to buildings and structures. This shallow moonquake data led 2 Soviet astronomers who had been studying the satellite, Michael Vassin and Alexander Sherbakov, to theorize that it was not a natural moon at all, but a hollow artificial shell put in place by a highly advanced extraterrestrial race. Their theory was put in an article titled "Is the Moon the Creation of Alien Intelligence?" from the eminent Soviet journal Sputnik, and hypothesizes that the moon was potentially a Noah's Ark, or a battleship, or perhaps a potential necropolis for a now extinct colony of extraterrestrials. They weren't entirely sure on that part. But of all the bodies in the solar system, why the moon? We're going to explore the many anomalies of the moon that make it unique from any other orbiting planet's satellites, while diving deeper into the evidence presented of it being artificially made, hollow, or potentially an extraterrestrial outpost. Now, let's start with the anomalies. First, the prevailing explanation of how the moon was formed and why it doesn't hold weight. Scientists have a few theories, but the main one is called the giant impact hypothesis. This states that the moon was formed from chunks of debris when the Earth was struck by another foreign body. Evidence to support this is that the moon's elemental composition is similar to that of Earth. Also, that the moon is less dense than the Earth. The moon's mean density is 3.3 grams per cubic centimeter, whereas the Earth's is 5.5 grams per cubic centimeter. The explanation for this is that when the Earth was struck, the lightest elements most easily escaped Earth's gravity to form our moon, except they didn't. The Earth is made of 46.1% oxygen, 28.2% silicone, 8.2% aluminum, and 5.6% iron, accounting for 88.1% of the mass of the Earth's crust. The moon, on the other hand, is made of 43% oxygen, 20% silicone, 19% magnesium, 10% iron, 3% calcium, 3% aluminum, 0.42% chromium, 0.18% titanium, and 0.12% manganese. While these compositions are similar, they in no way support the lightest elements claim or the density claim. Iron concentration on the moon is twice that of Earth's, and it is the heaviest of the elements. in some cases, double the weight of others. Aluminum makes up 5% less of the moon's composition and is the third lightest element on the list. However, the strangest and most damning to this theory is the presence of titanium on the moon. It is speculated that there is 10% more titanium composition on the moon than on Earth. Believing that a meteor impact would have struck Earth and caused its titanium, the fourth heaviest element and also only less than 1% of Earth's composition, to leave and form such a large percentage of the moon is laughable. Even with a composition similar to ours, Apollo astronauts had extreme difficulty drilling into the surface of the moon's craters, the deepest available area on the surface. This is due in large part to a much higher concentration of titanium. When scientists attempted to drill into the surface of the craters, they were barely able to penetrate, going as far as to break their tools. What they discovered was processed metals like brass, mica, and pure titanium. While our Earth does not have similar concentrations of titanium, there is a structure that does, but we'll get to that later. The moon is 2,100 miles in diameter compared to the Earth's 8,000-mile diameter. The moon, being a little more than a quarter the size of Earth, is a strange characteristic when compared with any other natural satellite in our observable cosmic region. Of all the moons orbiting planets in our solar system, ours is the fifth largest. All the other planets with moons larger than ours are massive gas giants. In fact, when it comes to planet and moon ratio, ours is the largest. Are there moons with other planets similar to the size of ours? Yes. Are those planets in proportion to the size of Earth? Absolutely not. It is quite unique in that regard and directly affects Earth's ability to have habitable life. The size of our moon is an anomaly. It affects the Earth wobble on its axis in such a way that it only changes a single degree over thousands of years. Without the moon's pull and balance, Earth could tilt as much as 85 degrees, causing drastic climate changes, which would be devastating to life, and most likely would have prevented life as we know it from ever occurring. It is estimated that less than 10% of all terrestrial planets in the entire universe have a moon-to-planet size ratio like ours, a necessity for harboring life. Whether or not this was by coincidence or design is an area up for debate, but before we talk about the possibility of intelligent extraterrestrial design, we still have to go over the main other unique features. If you were to look up at the moon in Russia in 2020, you would see the exact same side as a person looking at it from America in the 1500s or Egypt in 1000 BC. The side of the moon facing the Earth never changes. While the simplest explanation would be that the moon doesn't rotate, it's not exactly that simple. The reason is that the moon completes exactly one rotation for every time it circles the Earth. So from Earth's perspective, the moon never rotates. This is known as a tidal orbit or tidal locking. While this is a unique characteristic, it is not unique to our moon. All orbiting moons large enough to be round are typically tidally locked with their planets, 20 in our solar system alone. The gravitational pull of each celestial body acts on one another and pulls them in that particular orbit. Even without considering all the other strange facts about the moon, the biggest coincidence is the requirements for a perfect solar eclipse. The moon happens to be about 400 times smaller than the sun, but the sun also happens to be about 400 times further from the Earth than the moon. Being so, apparent geometry tells us that the apparent disk, or what we observe visually, of the sun is almost perfectly the size of the apparent disk of the moon. Earth is not unique when it comes to solar eclipses. All the gas giants, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune, have the ability to have solar eclipses. Where Earth's moon is unique is, again, the size. No other planet and moon has a near-perfect eclipse. Other planets would have their moon being significantly larger or smaller than their view of the sun. As viewed from the planet, the sun and moon are identical in size for us. So far, we have a moon that is uniquely large in comparison to our planet. so much so that it allows life to exist. Anything much larger or smaller would not allow this. The size also allows a tidal orbit, a perfectly synchronized orbit that makes it so one side is always facing the planet. It is also perfectly sized and distanced between the Earth and Sun, such that when a solar eclipse occurs, it nearly perfectly blocks out the Sun as viewed by those on Earth. There are no other current orbiting moons in the universe that we know of that meet all three of these unique criteria. On Earth, craters are the result of meteor impacts, with a scaled proportion of depth to width. Basically, the wider one is, the deeper it should be due to impact force being displaced. On the Moon, however, wide craters have similar depths to significantly narrow craters. It appears that despite the width, the craters only reach a certain depth and then stop. Scientists still have no explanation for this, and it's here that we now take our first theoretical leap. Is there any evidence whatsoever to support the idea that the Moon could be an artificial space station? As mentioned earlier, the Moon has a significantly higher concentration of titanium than on Earth. It is extremely strong and still fairly lightweight, which is why it is used on our own man-made space station, the ISS. The only reason it is not solely used over aluminum on our spacecraft and space station is that it is also extremely expensive and heavier than aluminum, meaning it is much more difficult to obtain and then get into orbit. However, and this is where we take turn into the realm of conjecture, if you were an advanced extraterrestrial race with an abundance of titanium and advanced propulsion and space traveling capabilities, these two main hurdles we face would not be an issue. If the Moon was in fact formed via the giant impact hypothesis, we would expect to see a similar density and elemental makeup as the Earth. As shown earlier, while the elements are similar, they are quite different. Even the claim that the lightest elements would have made up the Moon was proven wrong by their concentrations. Some of the heaviest elements, like iron, make up the greater percentages of the Moon, and elements like titanium are higher than that on Earth. Also, the density of the Moon is significantly less. The Moon's mean density is 3.3 grams per cubic centimeter, whereas the Earth's is 5.5 grams per cubic centimeter. What does that mean for our theory? As said earlier, if you were building a space station, you would want the lightest weight but strongest components present, like titanium and aluminum alloys. Titanium's density is 4.5 grams per cubic centimeter. Aluminum's density is 2.7 grams per cubic centimeter. This would account for the lower density of the Moon. However, you would also need heavier elements like iron for steel for other components of the structure. In modern vehicles, when a crash occurs, the damage to the main cabin is minimized because of something called crinkle points. These are areas that redistribute the force away from the main cabin and passengers they are looking to protect. The crater depth following meteor impacts on the Moon seem to indicate a similar strategy. The depth shows that the meteors are allowed to penetrate the surface to some degree, but then out and away from the Moon's interior. As mentioned earlier in the videos, the highest concentration of titanium has been found at the bottom of these craters. So whether the force is being nullified by redirection or by a tough inner shell made of strong titanium, this would support the theory of defensive protective measures of a space station. One major issue facing beings in space is exposure to solar radiation. If one were to build a space station, they would need to either avoid solar flares and other harmful events, or build up protection to it. Let's continue under the assumption that the Moon was a space station meant to observe Earth. You would want the defenses to look as realistic as possible. One of the most effective ways to absorb and nullify solar radiation is with water or ice. NASA has confirmed that the Moon has over 600 billion kilograms of water located under the surface. This would offer protection to all beings inside without the presence or need of external devices or atmosphere. With a theory like the Moon space station, you have to ask yourself, what would be the purpose? What benefit would there be? Based on the evidence of the moon being necessary to support life on the planet by keeping it from tilting on its axis, it could be just that. The moon was put there to support the petri dish that is Earth. A possible space station is a more challenging theory and would speak to the benefits of the tidal locking and perfect solar eclipses. From the perspective of an extraterrestrial observer, having a tidal-locked space station that always faces the observed planet means your instruments, detectors, cameras, or other observation tools are always facing the right way. You never have to wait for the space station to make another rotation to get a reading or take a measurement. For our scientists, a solar eclipse is the only time they are able to make certain observations or perform certain tests, such as observing the sun's corona or its upper atmosphere. One could speculate that this would be true in the reverse for an observer of Earth on the moon. The space station moon could have been placed in such a position to allow certain observations of Earth during a solar eclipse. Finally, when our scientists study wildlife, they typically tend to do so by being as hidden as possible, often using camouflage, blinds, or long-range cameras. This is done so that animals can be studied in their most natural habitat without them knowing that scientists are there at all. One could speculate that an extraterrestrial race studying humans would have the same approach. Having an opposite side of the moon to land spacecraft, supplies, or other items without ever having humans observe would be a huge benefit to the overall process. The moon is an anomaly in its formation, composition, and its strange characteristics. Every other planet's moon that we are aware of have some, but never all, of its unique qualities. Whether or not it was formed naturally or as an abandoned or even active space station is up for debate. However, the evidence and benefits of it potentially being one are not. It's crazy to think that in 1970, 2 Soviet astronomers had been studying the satellite and theorized that it was likely a hollow moon put in place by a highly advanced extraterrestrial race. Their theory was based on these observable anomalies, claiming the moon was an artificial shell that had been inhabited internally for years. At first glance, this theory seems insane. The moon being placed in orbit as a secret extraterrestrial base or surveillance post? Absolutely crazy. However, there are several inexplicable facts about the moon's relationship to Earth that, even individually, are hard to explain away. Coupled on top of the other, the chances of so many anomalies occurring all at the same point is far-fetched to the extreme. But, what do you think? Do you believe that the moon is hollow, or maybe a space station, or maybe even a battleship? Let me know in the comments. Till next time, I'm Allie, this is Wicked Encounters, and I'll see you next time. Bye!